Hey everybody, Mark and Devin here again. This time we are in Zoom webinar, and we're just going to talk to you about a couple of the differences between webinar and your normal meeting. So something important to remember about Zoom webinar is that when you start the webinar initially from the web browser or from your email address, you will be dumped into what's called a practice session. In the practice session, no one can see you. No audience will be able to get in. Only panelists and hosts and co-hosts and alternative hosts will be allowed into the webinar. So once you click the blue button, that is what will trigger allowing audience in. So I'm going to go ahead and click it to start up the webinar. First big difference is in the amount of options that the participants panel is now hiding for us. If you go over here to the More tab, you'll notice the More tab has many more options than usual. There are options for allowing participants to unmute themselves. That's talking about the panelists. And there are options to allow panelists to start their own videos. There's a button for locking the webinar. There's a button that's turned off by default to play sound when someone joins or leave. You really were missing that joining sound. There are options to allow attendees, those are the people viewing your webinar, to raise their hand or view the participant count. And there's also options for the attendee video layout. Ours is set to follow host's view, so whatever view I'm currently looking at is the view the attendees in our webinar would be seeing. You can lock them to the active speaker view or to a gallery view. Generally, I tend to leave this on follow host's view. Every panelist in your group of panelists here will have more options that you can control as the host. So you'll notice for Devin, I have the ability to chat with him, stop his video, spotlight. It's very similar controls to the meeting controls. I also have the option to put him on hold in case he needs to take a break for a second, but not necessarily remove him. And I also have the option to change his role to attendee. So if he's done with his part of our presentation, he just wants to watch the rest, I could change his role to attendee, and then he can interact with the Q&A section and all that fun stuff. In fact, that's what I'm going to do to him right now. And I'm just going to click that, and he's going to disappear for a bit. You'll notice there is an attendees section as well over here. The attendees section lets you control different attendees. You can remove them, rename them. You can promote them to panelist, which would bring Devin back to where he just was. You can privately chat with them. You can also allow them to talk. This is a relatively new feature. If you allow an attendee to talk, they can perhaps ask a question to the panel or interact with the show in some way. I'm going to allow Devin to talk just to see if it works. Devin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Great, and I can also mute Devin here. And I can also disable his talking as well, which just puts him exactly back to where we started. Something interesting about the chat functions in webinar is that there are panelists and attendees. As host, you can chat with everyone. What you'll need to remind your panelists is there are private chat messages that they can send to each other, which is the panelists. And then there are not so private chat messages that go to the whole audience as well. So if they've selected panelists and attendees, this will talk to the audience as well. Just a quick note. The QA section is really handy. It allows audience to ask questions during the presentation and even after the presentation. And it allows them to ask both technical questions that you as the host might just address while the panelists are speaking. And it also allows them to ask more specific questions about the presentation or for the panelists to discuss. You'll notice Devin just asked us a question here that says, what is the meaning of life? So there's two ways to handle this. The first is that I can answer it by typing an answer here, and I can say 42. And I can choose to send this message privately to Devin. So if he was asking about his microphone, maybe I don't want to bother the rest of the audience with this, and I'll just send that privately there. Or I can let the whole audience know what I think the meaning of life is. You'll notice that question, once it's answered, disappears from the open questions column, and it goes into the answered questions. Once it's answered, you can still type additional answers. The other option that you have for open questions is to answer the question live. So if Devin were asking a question to the panelist, you could choose to answer the question live. So you could say, hey, Devin, videos are disabled for attendees, don't worry about it. And you can click the answer live button. The only other option is to dismiss or delete these questions. So if there are some questions that you're just not going to be able to get to for the panel or they're irrelevant, you could also dismiss them. I'm going to select the answer live option, and it'll actually tell us, hey, you would like to answer this question live, and then once you've finished answering it live, you can select done. So this has been our presentation on Zoom webinar. It's very similar to running a Zoom meeting with just a few extra little features that give you a little bit more clarity between the audience and the panelists. Thanks for watching.
See ya.